Greetings everyone, it's Logical here. I want to make this clear, it's not a sponsored video. I'm just going to show this to give you a context of what I'm doing. This is a door I created, a design for an immersive experience playing board game and tabletop games and role-playing games. So I made this door to be able to fit into that building that I also designed to print. And this is the final result to give you an idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. So it's a basic a board game that you play with miniatures and you roll the dice and you role play and have adventures or skirmish game. You play against each other or you help each other. To give you an idea, all this was printed in draft mode at 0.28 millimeters. So the functional door that you saw that I made, I decided to do a stress test for the printer and at the same time doing something that we call scatter terrain. And those can be like ruins of the buildings of something or just rubble, random rubble. And they serve a purpose of blocking views for the soldiers in the game. I decided to print two versions of this, one at 0.28 millimeter and one at 0.08 millimeter for better quality. I did not modify the printer for faster print, I just straight out from the printer. The center speed is 200 millimeter per second. I didn't go into ludicrous mode or slow mode or anything like that. And the reason for that is just because as a community, we just want to print our stuff, no hassle, no fidgeting, no tampering, no playing around with all the settings. Just put the file in, print, and take the print out. And that unfortunately doesn't always work. The 0.08 millimeter, the highest quality print, kind of failed. And one of the reasons for that, it could be that it's moving too fast and should have probably slowed down the printer to print slower. Now on a larger print with less delicate parts, I'm pretty sure that would have failed, but I know that because of experience of printing. Although that print failed, it still served the purpose because it shows the difference in the quality between a 0.28 millimeter layer height and a 0.08 millimeter layer height. And it really shows the difference, and I will demonstrate all the little intricacies of it. And to be fair, I really challenged the printer with this because all of this was printed without support. There are a lot of harsh angles and thin space you can see there with very, very little support for the printer to print that. And I fully expected the printer to fail. And it did fail for the higher quality one. But that's more like the user error. It goes really, really fast at 200 millimeter per second. Another setting that I usually do too is I change my infill to 5%. All my terrain is always printed at 5%. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason for that is to save time for printing because, I can save 1 or 2 hours and even sometimes more with less infill. The second reason is obviously also cost saving of filament. And the third reason is one like this one, why this print failed. The default setting is 15% infill, which means that in contact with a delicate piece more often, possibly knocking it down, which failing this print. Speed also being a factor. Let's move on to the details. So I'm going to be dry brushing black just so the camera can pick up all the different layer lines and see how different it is with 0.28 versus 0.08. All those long pieces are supposed to be the equivalent of a 2x4s. And when you look at it while I'm dry brushing, it looks like very tiny steps. So those layer lines really shows off. Now when I take the other piece that at 0.08, it's really smooth and it doesn't look like there's any layer lines. They are there, but they're really, really small. Same goes with the slab of stone that's underneath 2x4s. One of the reasons I picked that piece is because there's so many different angles that makes it perfect to be able to see how I can design pieces that really take the advantage to achieve the best results. Now that I'm done dry brushing, let's look and compare both pieces together. Although you can still see the layer line, this is really zoomed in. And compared to the other one, you can see that the steps are really, really pronounced. And it doesn't look at all like a 2x4 like it was intended to be. When you look at the left brick, it really does look like a brick. The draft mode printout doesn't look like a brick at all. Same goes with the slab of stone. It doesn't look like a slab of stone. And the 2x4 doesn't look like 2x4. On the higher quality, the 6x6 really does look like wood. The draft mode is less convincing. And you have to remember, those two pieces were printed flat. Anything printed on the horizontal plane will show the layer line if it's angled even the slightest. On the other hand, anything that is on the vertical plane, the layer lines will be less visible and the print quality will greatly improve. Next, let's look at the overhang. Look at the higher quality print, you can still see some overhanging, and when you compare it to the draft mode, you can really see the overhang because there's more surface that is being printed in the air. Because in the higher quality, the layer lines are closer so they can support each other. While in draft mode, a lot of it is printed in the air and they just pile up until they reconnect again after a few passes over. Here you can see it a bit better. I'm just going to hold on to it so you can really notice the difference between both of them. You can even see it better here. It's also a different angle for that to be printed. So the one on the left looked more like a 2x4, while the other one has all that overhang that look really nasty. In my case, it's not a engineered piece that really needs to be precise, so I can always use that overhang as being moss or plants that are hanging on underneath the 2x4, whatever object that I have. It's great because those defects can actually become effects of the terrain. Remember earlier I mentioned horizontal and vertical? Those three game tiles are exactly the same STL that I printed in a different angle. The one on the top is printed flat, the one in the middle is printed in 45 degrees, and the bottom is printed at a 90 degree. And they end up looking so different. Now, then also the finish makes a big difference. See, the one on the left was printed at 90 degree, and the one on the right was printed flat at horizontally. You can see the layer lines has a huge effect. But you have to think when you play the game in this situation, you're not looking really closely at the pieces. So in overall game, it doesn't really matter unless you want more details. And you don't need to print at higher quality because printing in a vertical plane, all the details of the layer lines are barely noticeable. If the model you're printing is really thin like that, you will need to use support. Otherwise, you might have layer shifts or the whole thing might just topple over and you have a failed print. This last generation of printers are really a huge game changer for the 3D printing. Whether you're doing this professionally or just for a hobby, it's now becoming just an office or a home appliance. You can put it right next to your inkjet printer or your laser printer, press the print button, and there you go, you got yourself a printed object. To a certain extent, the environment still has a huge impact in 3D printing. For example, if the air is moist or the air is dry, if it's cold, if it's warm, if it's really hot, if there's a draft, all those things are still affecting the printing, but the printers are easier to use. You don't have to replace parts as often as you need to. You don't have to tweak this. You don't have to fiddle. You don't have to be a tinkerer. You can just be a person that comes, press the print button, and that's the goal of this video. I want to show you that you don't have to know all that excessive information and knowledge to be able to print and get decent results and decent prints. On the other hand, if you are a tinkerer, you can really push those machines and have near perfect results. But that is for another video, and it's going to be a much longer video with a lot more complicated things to do.